Well, hello, free people of the Rocky Mountain region, and welcome to this Free State Colorado interview. Today, I'm joined by Dan Woog, a former Colorado state legislator, former Town of Erie trustee, and current candidate for House District 19. Well, Dan, I hope you are well, and thank you for joining me today.
Yeah, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on, and it's good to be here, Brandon.
Perfect. Well, Dan, we're going to discuss the affordability problems that so many Colorado families are struggling with. Life is more expensive than ever. People are having a hard time paying their bills. And you have some ideas on how to reverse this trend. I'm interested to hear your ideas, but first, Dan, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I'm happy to talk about this issue as it's probably the number one issue I hear at the doors. Just to start, I'm running for state representative in House District 19, and I formerly served in House District 63, which includes some of the area, but obviously every 10 years after the census, they change the boundaries. And now this district, HD 19, is a little bit different. It's very balanced. It's got Weld County and Boulder County. So it's a very balanced seat. Now, I lost just barely last election to the incumbent Jennifer Parenti. She's a Democrat, and she's actually decided not to run again. So I have a new opponent. So yeah, it's been good. When I first ran back in the day for House District 63, the oil and gas industry was, I thought, a big help to Colorado. It was huge for the economy, a lot of employees. It just really helped our state out financially and many other ways. So I saw an attack on that previous as a town trustee in Erie, and I saw that there was really this narrative that was I believe to be false, some of it, and highly exaggerated on the pollution and negative effects this industry had on Colorado. So I saw that happening, and that really drove me to run for state representative years ago. That was really the main driver, just seeing how business is getting attacked unjustly, I felt, and with a lot of exaggeration and frankly, probably a financial campaign behind it. That made me run. And now this time, I took a long time to think about it after a loss, but I wanted to run again because now I've seen, and I'll talk about this more as we go, but I've seen regulation affect my own business. I have a small property management business, and I've seen over the last few years just new laws coming that have really forced me to change the way I do business. And again, I'll get into more detail on that, but have really affected my costs and affected my customers because of that. So that's really driven me, and kind of the number one reason, just as a small business owner and seeing the detrimental effects of really too much regulation at times.
Oh, definitely, Dan. I really appreciate that perspective. We have seen some really bad attacks on the oil and gas industry, and I don't think those attacks are going to change unless we get some different people in the legislature, that's for sure. Let's go ahead and look at some headlines, Dan, showing just how difficult it is for people to afford life in Colorado right now. Kind of provide some of that context and some of that data that really shows that. So I put some slides together here, really interested to go over some of this here with you. So pulling that up here shortly. Perfect. Can you see the screen there?
Sure can.
Wonderful. Well, that's the big issue. Like you said, you're knocking doors. I'm hearing it every day. Colorado is not affordable. It's less affordable than it's ever been. Growing up here, it didn't seem like it was that expensive to live here, but it's so tough for people these days. So, what can really be done about it? Let's talk a little bit about what we've seen in the past. So, this is just an article from August of this year. Denver is one of the most expensive cities to raise kids in. Study here. Denver is the number 9 least affordable city to raise children in, with cost to raise just one child being more than $500,000 over 18 years. I mean, it's absolutely crazy, especially when we see headlines tying Denver to San Francisco and New York City. And I know your district's not in Denver, Dan, but it definitely is a lot of Denver workers probably in your community. Really not that far from Denver these days, that's for sure.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah, there's a lot of people that commute. Yeah, I mean, and Boulder similar in expense. So there's a lot of people in this district that I know that work in Boulder and downtown Denver. So that definitely affects them and hits them there.
Definitely. And unfortunately, we're seeing record number of evictions this year as well. This was also from August of this year, the Denver Post. And it's not just Denver. The article goes into detail here saying statewide in Colorado, there have been more than 25,300 eviction filings in 2024, 10.5% more than at this point last year. So, I mean, this is absolutely terrible. We have a lot of people who've been in their homes for decades, and now they're being forced out. They're having trouble paying their bills. And so unfortunate. I mean, Dan, what have you seen with your property management company?
Yeah, yeah, I appreciate that. It's Yeah, we go back to COVID, and obviously all of us know that caused a lot of issues. I saw, of course, we had a lot of tenants struggling to pay rent during COVID because they weren't working necessarily or working less. So That was very common. And fortunately, even the homeowners and many of my homeowners are just, they have one rental property. It's their nest egg when they retire. That's very common for me. And the homeowners were very understanding, of course. They knew what was going on and oftentimes allowed a little more time to get the rent in. But yeah, that caused a huge issue. And really since then, I've seen people struggling. It might not be the rent. It might be, a lot of times I get notified if they're not paying their local utility bill, their water bill with the town of area, whatever it may be. So that just has increased since COVID. There's no question. And we clearly have seen inflation really hurting people and not necessarily their income going up where they work. So that's just caused a huge issue. And a lot of that's, and like I said, and we can get into more of this during this talk, but a lot of that's, I don't know if everyone understands that when businesses have regulation thrown upon them from the state, we have to change our way. I mean, as a property manager, I had to, it increased my liability. So I had to hire more people. So I have to pay more people. I had to increase costs to my customers, my tenants, my clients. So that's just one little example for my business, but it happens across the board. And as a legislator, I saw that happening to other industries. I mean, some bigger, sometimes it's insurance industry, it can be property management, it can be healthcare, it can be everything. But that regulation forces businesses, if they want to keep open, to raise their costs. And guess who suffers for it? So unfortunately, as we know, people's incomes haven't necessarily gone up, but that businesses' costs have gone up. And then again, other things we talk about, businesses that sell products that have them delivered, the company, they have to pay for that gas price. Now there's a higher gas price. So whoever's delivering has a higher charge. So all this stuff ties in together and it just absolutely crushes our economy. So it's gotten tough and I've seen it with tenants. I see even driving past properties now, I see more people that aren't watering their lawn as much. I mean, it's dying, but the reality is I know like, hey, they're cutting where they can. They're trying to pay their rent or the mortgage and they got to cut somewhere. So people are struggling. It's absolutely real. Even in my district, it's all over. I see it every day.
100%. And I'm really glad you mentioned like that idea of all these small fees, all these small regulations, small taxes really adding up. Because so often we hear down at the state legislature that, oh, it's just going to be 29-cent delivery fee. Oh, it's just going to be a 0.01% sales tax increase. It's just going to be this and this and this. But then you look at over a decade and you go, oh my gosh, how did things become so expensive? And there you go, right?
Yep, absolutely. And that's what we see. I mean, I am much more cautious. I'm always a conservative, but in the last couple of years, I'm looking at my electric bill. I'm turning the air conditioning up a little higher temp during the day. And I mean, and that's fine. And we should do that. But more than ever, I'm very cognizant. And I think everyone is here that we got to start saving because you get those bills in the mail. It's like, oh my gosh, how is my electric bill that high? How's my gas bill that high? So yeah, it all affects us and it's hitting us from every direction right now.
Definitely. And here's another article here. This was actually from CNBC from July of this year, ranking Colorado as one of the least or most expensive states to live in, one of the least affordable here. So for Colorado, got an F, 10 out of 50 points, really bad there. Consumer price index up 2.3%. Annual homeowners insurance is $2,600. Average home price in Denver, $650,000. Monthly energy bill of $145. So yeah, I mean, Colorado, is one of the most expensive states to live in, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And people are seeing it everywhere. I'm sure, like you said, Dan, you're knocking on doors, talking to people in your community, and we hear it all the time. This was a recent survey. I'll have the links at the website at freestatecolorado.com. But one of the top issues, I think, really driving this election that people are really going through is the cost of housing and the cost of living. I mean, you look at it here, this is an issue all across the spectrum here. The cost of living, 61% see it as an extremely serious problem, 24% saying it's a very serious problem. That's 86, 9 out of 10 people nearly are saying that this rising cost of living is at the very least, a very serious problem. I mean, it's absolutely crazy what we're seeing.
Yeah. And that's what I'm glad you brought up this slide. That's one thing I want to actually focus on. And I'm hoping to get, if I am fortunate to win, I'm hoping to have some legislation that will address specifically the condominium defect issue. As many people know, we have expansive soil in many areas in the state, and that created a lot of issues for builders with condominiums. I mean, some settling issues, and now the liability has been just way too high on these builders, and they quit building condominiums, which Frankly, I think that's one thing we need to focus on to allow and to help them and to help decrease that liability. Because if we can get some condominiums being built again, that's at least going to give a little bit lower prices on some of these homes. And you said it. I mean, I wonder if my kids, I have a 15-year-old and a 13-year-old, and I really don't know once they're out of high school if they can live here in Colorado. I mean, it's just so expensive. It's tough for everyone, like I said. So that's definitely a focus I have. I worked with a legislator in the past, Democrat, that is fairly pro-business friendly that I hope to work with again. And I know she's kind of on the same page with some of this stuff, and that's Representative Byrd. So I'm hoping in talking to her as things get going, we can kind of spearhead this, and there's just got to be a way. I mean, I know it's important that people know what they're getting into, and I think there's ways to do that and ways to make it apparent. But we got to have more affordable housing. So, and frankly, I've been in some of these units, and I do understand there's settling issues. That's a concern, but rarely have I seen just a building completely devastated that can't be inhabitable. So, I think as long as people are aware of it, they might be willing to take that risk. They see the history and they realize, you know what, this might be an issue, but they let me know about it before the purchase, and it's what I can afford, and I'm going to make that decision anyway. So, like everything, let the consumer, let the buyer make decisions. Give them all the information. Let them make the decision. I don't like rarely government making that decision for them. It just leads to, as we see, a lot of negative effects, and this one being high cost of living.
So with the condominiums, Dan, are you talking about like the construction defects kind of laws? Is that what you mean?
Yeah. Yep. The construction defect laws, and again, so yeah, the builders have so much liability now. And again, I see that in my own business as a property manager from government regulation, that I'm like, holy cow, I'm afraid to do anything. You feel like you're going to get penalized and sued and lose a lot of money or lose your license. So there's got to be a balance. I think we can get all the stakeholders together and talk about this and find a balance where we can kind of open up that opportunity again for builders and get some first time home buyers that probably have to move away and take their job. They're going to move to another state and work somewhere else, where we could use them here, and we could use, obviously, that helps the economy, having them here, having them as a consumer, and taxes, which I want there to be less, but obviously the people we have here that are good workers, and if they can get into a house, we want to keep them here.
Definitely, definitely. Just one more survey here. Again, the links will be at freestatecolorado.com. But in their own words, Coloradans say affordable housing, lower taxes, and addressing the cost of living are the most important things state government can do to improve life. So this is one of those polls, one of those surveys where they had the people describe it. They didn't give them the list. It wasn't as much of a push poll where they're trying to get an answer out of them. But they said, hey, you tell us. You tell us what the biggest issues. And overall, affordable housing, lower rent, taxes, lower taxes, tax issues, fixed tabor, cost of living, inflation, gas prices. I mean, that really is across the board one of the biggest things that people are dealing with. So we're seeing it consistently. I mean, this is from either end of last year, beginning of this year, we're seeing these polls. And unfortunately, this one kind of shocked me a little bit because so many people love Colorado. It's a great place to live, but a stunning 51% have seriously considered moving due to the cost of living. 1 in 10 have already moved in the last few years. And I mean, that's absolutely crazy. 38% have moved to a different state that is more affordable or considering it. 13% to a different community or area of the state that is more affordable, and then the 10% have already moved. So, I mean, 51%, when you think about that, half the people in Colorado are seriously considering moving because of how expensive it is. I mean, this is a serious problem that's affecting, I mean, half the population, 90% of the population is worried about it. I mean, I think it is the biggest issue that so many candidates for office, so many current legislators and politicians are not really talking about. So I really appreciate that, Dan, you're making this a big part of your campaign. So, that gets us to the point here. What is the solution here? So, what you mentioned construction defects, allowing condominium builders and some of this other properties to kind of have more ability to build, getting out of their way. What else, Dan? I'll make a little list here of some of the ideas that you have here to make Colorado more affordable.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't even think in my platform there's a lot of ideas, but there's a few ideas that go a long way. And I'll mention again, construction defects definitely being one, but any we have to look at these bills that come to us as legislators and see what effects they're going to have on that particular industry, because maybe what maybe what someone's trying to do with the bill and think they're helping with completely has a negative effect on us, us taxpayers, us consumers, whatever you want to describe us as. But so I think just getting amending bills and watching out for bills that add taxes or fees. And as you mentioned earlier, unfortunately, right now the Democrat Party, they like to pass fees because they don't need to go to the taxpayers and ask for a vote, and they I've argued that these really are taxes. They're forced upon us. I don't call that a fee. But so, yeah, just stopping tax and fees, possibly amending some bills already. Like I said, there's just industries that have been hurt. You know, the oil and gas industry, going back to that, it's been so regulated. It's practically at a standstill here. I mean, that's one of our biggest economic, you know, businesses here in Colorado, and it's been regulated. We have some of the safest oil and gas operations in the country, if not the safest, yet there's so much regulation has practically stopped that. So supporting oil, yeah, I mean, just when we open these businesses back up and let them thrive, it's going to get our cost of living down. So yeah, I think it's going to be me, you know, running bills that can lower costs. And one thing I did, just to hit on bipartisan legislation, when I was a state representative, I worked to lower taxes on building materials for public schools. And again, that was with Representative Byrd. So it's a little thing, but just like we said, all these little fees we get here and there, and this regulation that increases businesses' costs, which are passed on to us, all of that stuff, it nickel and dimes us, and all of a sudden it's almost impossible to get all our bills paid. I just think there's a lot of people that can hardly even save right now. They're just living paycheck to paycheck. So just that focus on every bill, looking at the fiscal note, that's with the legislation, we see what it's going to cost. We also oftentimes have to dig a little deeper to see, are they missing something, or are there going to be more costs with this? But that's really key, looking at that fiscal note with every bill, and then, you know, questioning myself, are there going to be other costs? Are there going to be other costs to other people? So we have to look into that. I think those are the main things. And just, yeah, it's affected everyone. Like I said, I see it in my business. I see it to myself. I mean, I feel it. I rarely go to eat anymore. I met with the restaurant owner that's local. He has 2 restaurants, and he said, "Gosh, I'm being taxed on top of taxes. I barely can get by." And we know, I mean, running a restaurant's got to be one of the most difficult things, and he's just struggling. So people just want some relief and help, and hope that their legislators are going to be looking out for them. And just, I don't think they're looking for amazing things. Just, hey, can you just, you know, keep this regulation that might hurt us? Can you just be on the lookout for that, and either amend bills or just reject them if it's going to be an issue? So that's what I hope to do.
Awesome, Dan. Yeah, no, really good points because we've seen, this Democratic supermajority really just get in their way with everything. I mean, pushing some of this extreme anti-business, anti-property owners regulations these last few years. So even just stopping that, right? Just overturning that supermajority, getting some other people in the office who are going to actually stand up for working families and business owners. What do you say, Dan, to these Democrats? I'm sure, like say your opponent or Democratic voters or unaffiliated voters in your community, because the Democrats come out and they say, hey, we're going to pass legislation to go after landlords, go after property owners in the name of helping renters. What can you do as a legislator to help renters out, to help people be able to afford to live in Colorado in that rental type situation? Because most of the
Yeah.
about half the population probably rents right now.
Yeah.
I know you had a really good bill when you were served in the legislature previously, but what can you do to help out renters?
Yeah, I did have a bill to, I believe, give them a tax credit when I was in there. But you know what? And again, so it's the regulation. I mean, I keep hearing about rent control too, which will really be a disaster. And the problem is, if government starts saying, telling us how much we can charge a rent as a landlord or a property manager, we know that's coming. We're just going to raise the rent really high before that gets here, just to make sure for the next 5 years we're going to be okay. That will probably increase rents. So people are going to know that's coming. That's not going to be a good solution. They've made it. When I was down in the legislation, the Democrats said, "Hey, you can only charge this much for a security deposit." And yes, we need to be fair, but we know best as property managers and landlords what kind of the market generally can afford. We got to protect our own investment. So when you do something like that, now when I'm doing, my credit check, I'm actually going to I'm going to make it harder. Like my criteria is now higher. Like now I'm going to require a higher credit score. I'm going to require, a larger income to debt ratio. So now that actually hurts tenants. Now it's harder for them to get into a home. This is very common sense when you're in the business. And I tried to explain this to Democrats when I was down there. It is very frustrating. It's frustrating being in the majority or even now the super majority. Um, it's just so difficult to explain and have someone work with you. But there are a few down there. And you know what? I've been down there before. I'm going to do my best right away if I get in there to reach across the aisle, go meet all the legislators I don't know. Obviously, talk to the ones I've worked with before, and just really, I know it seems like we're always enemies, Democrats and Republicans at the Capitol, and I get that there's times we disagree very strongly, but the only way to get anything accomplished is to at least meet the ones that are open to listening and just have those conversations. And it's not just once and hi here, you got to take that time and really sit with them and explain these things. And there are business friendly Democrats. There are some that understand and are willing to listen. So that's what I hope to do, and it can be done. So I'm looking forward to the task.
Awesome. We'll definitely encourage people to check out your website. I thought it was pretty good stuff here with there it is. Your videos that you've been doing have been pretty entertaining, pretty fun stuff. So definitely encourage people, especially if you're in House District 19, to read your website, check out the information there. And this is definitely one of the most winnable seats for Republicans to pick something up and chip away at that Democratic majority. I think there's a really good opportunity here. Actually, I have it written on my whiteboard. I think it was 1,467 votes that you lost by there in 2 years ago. So definitely one of the tightest races in 2022. So massive opportunity here to get somebody who supports business, who's going to support property owners and support our rights as just individuals here in Colorado and protect our working families because people are struggling right now and we need a change. I think everybody can agree with that.
Yeah, thank you, Brandon. And I will say I won't get long-winded into it, but part of my platform is also safety, and I think that ties in with our economic prosperity. We're going to attract less businesses and less people wanting to work and live here and raise their kids when our rate of crime is so high. That might be a different topic for a different time, but that to me that really does tie into a strong economy and people having success here and loving it here and not moving away, like you said, people wanting to stay. I think part of that could be crime as well, that people are just concerned. So but I really
No,
appreciate you having me on. It's been
no,
great.
definitely. And definitely, I just want to touch on that. I 100% agree with you there. I mean, the occupancy rate is at the lowest it's been in Denver for these commercial buildings down there. I mean, there's so much office space. And you got to say, of course, it's the cost of just doing business down there, the regulations, the restrictions, all of that. But also, yeah, people don't want to go to work when they're
Right.
afraid. They're afraid it's going
Yeah.
to be getting dark here pretty quick, earlier and earlier as we get into the winter. And people are like, I don't want to be down in downtown Denver after work, afraid to walk to my car at night,
Yeah.
things like that. So I think you're 100% right. You combine that affordability issue with the public safety issue, and people are worried about the direction the state's going. That's for sure. But I wish you all the luck. Wish you the best there, Dan. And please keep us updated. Hope to see you down at the state capitol
All
next
right.
year.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on, Brandon. Have a great rest of your week. And yeah, I'll do my best. I hope anyone can look at my website and give me help if they can. It's a close race either way, but I really think, like you said, we can do some things if we just win a few seats back. It's just going to help that much to be able to work with the other side. So I really appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, sir. Take care.
Thank you. You too.